And I read the book and it made me cry. The book was about women's empowerment, but how women's economic empowerment specifically. And it was about how women are often told to budget rather than invest. It also talks about how women have been kept out of the economic development of our country over time. Us not being able to get a bank account less than 50 years ago. Us not being able to have jobs and voting rights and all the things. And so we're hundreds of years behind men when it comes to building wealth for our families. And I knew personally that women in general got less than 2% of venture capital. I knew that Black women got less than 0.01%. And so reading her book made me enraged almost, and made me, I think it began my journey of becoming an extreme feminist. What's up, you guys? Welcome back to the More Rounds podcast. I'm Kim Lewis, your host, CEO, and co-founder of Chromix. And today I am solo dolo. So I am here today to teach you guys about something that I think I've mastered in my industry, and I think you should master too. I think everyone should master this skill, the skill of networking. So let's jump right into it. The biggest thing about networking, before you start networking, the things you can do today is actually becoming a quick study. This is the hard part. I think actually getting into the rooms, meeting the people, talking to them, building a relationship, that's the easy part. The hard part is qualifying yourself to be in those rooms. And a lot of times it's really hard to get to that first initial accomplishment. It's really hard to be like, well, I can't just say I was on Shark Tank like you, Kim, or I can't just say I raised $1 million. Like, how am I supposed to be impressive? How am I supposed to get into this room? But what you can do is read a book. You can spend $15 to get the book on Audible, and you really have to become a quick study. You want to be the person who's read a lot of the books so that when we sit down to talk to other entrepreneurs and CEOs and they're recommending things, you've already read them. You want to be the person that knows the answer when a question is, mentioned from the stage. You want to be a quick study. People want to know that you're smart, and they'll know that if you're in the know about a few different things. It's almost like if you ever go to like a fraternity or sorority and there's a certain lingo, right? Everybody knows they're lit. And if you don't know you're lit, you can't be in the org. It's kind of like that for entrepreneurship and VC. If you don't know the lingo, if you don't know you're lit, it's going to be hard for you to navigate those rooms. So the thing that you can do today after you finish this episode is go and buy a few of these books that I recommend. The first are going to be some books in the marketing and sales industry. My favorite is Influence by Robert Cialdini, or Downey. I always mess up his name. But he basically talks about how to influence people. You are going to learn how to win friends and the 6 to 7 principles it takes to actually influence people. An example is like the reciprocity rule. If you give someone something, they feel inclined to repay you a favor and they give it back to you. So that's just one of the many rules. The other one is like authority. Typically, if I say this shirt is lime green, you'll be like, okay. But if a designer said that no, that shirt is electric green, you're going to listen to the designer because they have more authority than I do on colors and patterns and designs. And that's one of the same principles you learn in the book. The second book on marketing and sales is Positioning by Jack Trout. He talks about how it's not enough to just say, oh, I'm a natural hair company. What is your position in the market? Chromix is a wash and go focused company. We help women get this hairstyle. That's our position in the industry. If I was to come into the industry just saying, oh, we do all natural hair for any general hairstyle, I can't own a space in your mind for that. The game I like to play is if I say gym shoes, what brand do you think of? Nike. If I say search, what brand do you think of? Google. If I say mosquito repellent, what do you think of? Off. Oftentimes we are focusing on, oh, I'm a mosquito repellent. But no, you need to own the space in the consumer's mind for the word off. And so I love those examples, but those 2 books helped me figure out my marketing strategy and how to influence people and then also how to position my brand. Now, when it comes to sales, my favorite book is Alex Hormozi's $100 million offer. He basically teaches you how to build an offer that people feel stupid saying no to. And I just think it's so good. Before Chromix was a natural haircut company and we focused on the wash and go. But what I learned is the real offer is that we help you master your curls in 21 days. Now that's an offer that if you want to wear your hair natural, you're like, I can master my curls in 21 days. Okay, I'm going to listen to what this company has to say. My next recommendation is E-Myth. It's a classic entrepreneur book, mostly because most entrepreneurs, they just get into a business because they want to make money for themselves. They're not thinking about the true pain point for the customer and really fixing it. And then once you do that, you're not thinking about setting your business up with processes and procedures from the jump. You're usually thinking, I can be a one-man show and do everything myself. But what you quickly learn is that you can't bring in other people if you never set up a process. So a process literally means, let's write it down on paper. These are the steps, step 1, step 2, step 3. This is the checklist. This is how often we go through the checklist. And you should build those things even for yourself. So that when you hire someone, it's a, hey, here's a checklist and here's a process for how we send an email to our customers, or how we deal with a return, or how we put money in the bank for ad spend. Like, these are just all this is how we develop a winning ad. A lot of times we don't have actual processes for these. And this book, E-Myth, takes you to the most simplest example of a woman who owns a pie shop. And it is a classic book that people bring up in conversation all the time in entrepreneurship. So you should definitely have read that book. If you're going to raise money, the other book that you have to have read is Venture Deals. It's like the Bible in the venture capital realm. A lot of people have read it. And if you're ever going to sign a deal, there's no other place you can really go to learn about the deals you're going to be signing. They're going to have tons of terms you don't understand. And the book is really thick and it's really dense. But when you go through it, it's like a dictionary. So if you don't understand what preferred shares are, you don't understand what common shares are, you don't understand what liquidation preference means, you don't understand all these different terms, this book is going to make it very simple for you to understand, but it is a thick read. So if you have no baseline for entrepreneurship or venture capital, this is an elevated book for sure. I would say a simpler book to read might be Angel by Jason Calacanis. That's going to teach you about angel investing from the angel's perspective or the investor's perspective. But that's going to teach you about how to do deals as an entrepreneur, because you're going to know what they want in their deal. So those two books are really important and popular in venture capital. Also, I'm going to shout out Arlan Hamilton. It's about damn time, but it's about funding and how to get information and really raise capital as a Black and brown founder. And the last book I'm going to recommend is called Buy, Then Build. And the reason I'm recommending this book is because you don't realize if you're raising money for your business, that means you're going to have to eventually sell your business. Whether you're selling it to the public or you're selling it to another business owner or a private equity firm or conglomerate, it doesn't matter. You have to build the business so that someone else can buy it, right? I love the book Buy Then Build because it just teaches you how you don't have to start from scratch. You can buy a business and then build it up. There's another book called Built to Sell. That's another really popular book as well. So before you get in these rooms, try to read as many of those books that I just mentioned, especially Positioning by Jack Trout and Influence by Robert Cialdini. The next thing you're gonna need to do is make sure your pitch is together. You know how they say you never know who you're gonna end up with in the elevator for 30 seconds? That is absolutely freaking true. Absolutely freaking true. If you are going to these events, you're running late or you're early, you just never know who's going to be in the elevator. You never know when you're going to have to pitch. Now, this does not mean go pitch everybody who is willing to talk to you about anything. Nobody wants that, because essentially these people you're pitching have been pitched 1,000 times. Just go and have your pitch ready in the back of your mind. Have said it to yourself 100+ times so that when the opportunity presents itself, you're ready. If you've seen any of the content we produce or Chromix online and thought, man, I want to invest in that company, now's your chance. Go to chromix.com/invest and you can become an investor today. Now back to the episode. So now that we've got our basics, right? We've got the education, that the material you should have read. We got the pitch ready. Now we're going to talk about how you actually get into those rooms. I want to say about last year, I wanted to meet Rachel Rodgers. She wrote a book called We Should All Be Millionaires. And I read the book and it made me cry. The book was about women's empowerment, but how women's economic empowerment specifically. And it was about how women are often told to budget rather than invest. It also talks about how women have been kept out of the economic development of our country over time. Us not being able to get a bank account less than 50 years ago. Us not being able to have jobs and voting rights and all the things. And so we're hundreds of years behind men when it comes to building wealth for our families. And then I knew personally that women in general got less than 2% of venture capital. I knew that Black women got less than 0.01%. And so reading her book made me enraged almost, and made me, I think it began my journey of becoming an extreme feminist. And so I had already been a part of the traffic sales and profit community, and Ezra from Blue Ribbon had already reached out to me, but I had yet to meet Rachel Rodgers from the ROI Summit. And Arlan, who's one of my early investors, Arlan Hamilton, she hit me up. She said, hey, I'm going to be at Rachel's event. Rachel's a real deal. Want you to know she's not out here scamming folks. You are someone who invests in yourself often. I would recommend it. If you can afford it, you should come. And it ain't no cheap ticket, y'all. It's thousands of dollars. And I was like, dang, like normally I don't always go to events like this when they're like thousands of dollars unless I'm getting a comp ticket. But Arlan told me to be there. So I was going to figure out how I was going to get my flight to Puerto Rico. I was going to spend a couple $1,000s on the ticket, not comped. And I was going to make sure I stayed near or at the conference hotel. And I was going to buy a VIP ticket. So Arlan told me to come to this event. I could have spent like the general admission ticket for $500, but I would be sitting in the back and I wouldn't have a chance to really network with Rachel. And I want Rachel to see me as a peer. And so I have to appear like a peer. So I paid for the VIP ticket, which is a few $1,000s. And this is important, y'all, because it wasn't like I had a deal I could get done with Rachel Rogers. It wasn't like I could really benefit immediately from that connection. But I knew she was going to be there. I knew Danielle Leslie was going to be there, and some other friends in my network, Terry Ujioma, Dominique Brown. Like, I just knew those other folks were going to be there. So I was like, okay, I'll make friends. And a lot of times you don't realize this. You're like, man, it's a few $1,000s to go to this event. But my network is worth more than my actual company. I know billionaires. I know CEOs of Fortune 500 companies. I know founders who have raised 8 figures, 10, 20, 50 million. I know founders who have exited 9-figure businesses. And so when I think about, should I spend $1,000, $2,000 on this event to meet these kinds of people who I know are making this kind of money, I think to myself, this friendship over 10 years, 20 years is going to make me so much more, 10, 20, 30, 50 times more than the actual $1,000 I'm going to spend today on this event. So I make the decision to go. So I get to the event. I'm solo dolo, y'all. And I don't have an offer or anything like that I need from Rachel. I make sure you get to the session early, right? If there's somebody you want to meet with, I wanted to make sure Danielle Leslie saw me because I met her in the past, but we weren't friends yet. So I wanted her to know that I was there supporting her. I brought her some products from Chromix as well. And I get to the session early. I make sure I look good because looking good makes you stand out, especially when other folks don't dress up. And I know people are like, oh my gosh, I don't have to do all of this. I'm like, look, this is the game, okay? If you want to look good, you want to impress some folks, you want to stand out, you got to look good in the process. You can't just be out here wearing, the tech bro hoodie and slacks, okay? So I dress up, and during the Q&A, I make sure I stand up, introduce myself, and ask a good question. Like a good question, not just like, what was your journey to getting to, like, I cannot stand when people get up to say, what was your journey for something type of question. Like ask them something that is relevant, interesting, and that you couldn't have just heard on a podcast, right? And I did that. And then Danielle was like, hey, Kim, what's up, girl? Da-da-da-da. Like, she kind of bantered with me from the stage. And then after that, they knew I was there. And so when we were hanging out to get cocktails later, I was hanging out with Abu Fofana. He was like, hey, we're all going back to Terry Ujioma's house. Terry has a penthouse here in Puerto Rico. Do you want to come with us? I was like, absolutely. And so now I end up spending my evening with Terry Ujioma, Abu Fofana, Corey Arvinger, Dominique Broadway, Danielle Leslie. And I just feel like I had no idea that was going to happen. I was going to meet Rachel, and my actual connections and friendships that lasted longer and have actually been more impactful for me came from just me making sure I was noticed by Danielle at the conference so she would know that I was there. And so this is like the power of networking, because each of those entrepreneurs have made millions of dollars in their business or tens of millions of dollars in their business. And I just got to kick it with them in the evening, okay? Another example of this is last year I had set out to make connections. One of my advisors told me, Kim, you keep saying you're raising money, but you're not doing what other founders are doing. Other founders are out here going to meetings, they're going to events, they're networking with investors, and you're at home with your 2 kids. And she's like, and I'm all for being present for your children, but know that you're not going to have the success of a founder who is out there raising money because you're not living that life. And I was like, dang. Like she crushed my little soul, but she was right. And so I had to kind of get in those rooms. And so I just started making sure I went to ROI after Arlan told me to go to Rachel's event last year. Then I saw Morgan DeBon, CEO Spring Break. Now Morgan and I have been running in the same circles for years. And I went to like her very first events, like Empower Her with Blavity, and I've gone to Afrotech a couple times. And I was like, CEO Spring Break, what is this? And I was like, well, I do want Morgan to feel like I'm supporting her, and I also want to meet, more people. And I was so glad that I went because there were so many, like Morgan was great. And Morgan actually ended up inviting me to her house after, like at the end of the day for the first day of the festivities. And I got to meet all her friends. But more than that, I ended up meeting Olamide from Topicals. And she and I basically spent the day like at the same table chit-chatting, and we became real friends. And of course, when you have these moments where you meet other founders, this is not the time to gatekeep your information, because this is how you build real friends. Because a lot of us have one-on-one situations with investors, with vendors, with retailers that we can't publicly talk about. Right. And so in these moments where I get to meet other founders who are doing numbers and they know that I'm doing numbers, we share information. We share information around what's helping us lower our customer acquisition costs, or what vendor worked really well for photography versus didn't, or, you know, this billboard in this location, I spent this, I got this back. These are things you just can't look in a textbook and find, and you're also not going to be able to just Google. And so this is a time where you want to be a good listener and a good friend. Now, if you're not a good person, this is going to be hard for you, because a lot of us entrepreneurs are really good at sensing inauthenticity and people who are liars or at the very least, just not kind people. And once we get a whiff of that, a lot of us exit. So we don't stay there very, very long. So I would just be mindful to enter those kind of friendships and relationships with the best of intentions, because people they notice right away. And then I have to add this. After you go to the event, you show up at the session, you sit in the front, you ask the question, you look good, you be kind, you listen, you help other people, give them information, or and be charismatic and kind. Once you're done for the day, go hang out by the bar of the conference hotel. You are bound to find somebody who you'll connect with. And not everybody that you connect with is going to be making more money than you or doing better than you. You might find somebody that you can help, because you never know. That person could be ahead of you in 5 years, or you could just make a legitimate friend. And it doesn't always have to be, I'm going to this conference to meet someone. One of my favorite connections and closest connections was actually Tracy from Hairbrella. At the time, I had raised our crowdfund and I was considering an investor, and I knew that investor was on her board, and that investor had asked me for a board seat. And I was just like, yo, like, who can I ask? So I called up, I looked on their portfolio companies. I looked on their website for all the portfolio companies, and I called, like, I DM'd like 5, and like 3 people got back to me. And Tracy was one of the ones that got on the phone with me. And if you know Tracy is like crazy about her time. Tracy does not answer unscheduled phone calls, even from me as a really good homie, unless it's like she really got the time or it's really urgent. But like, she's just such an assassin with her time. She spent, I don't know, at least 2 hours on the phone with me. And we were just chopping it up, sharing numbers, sharing fundraising woes, founder woes, like all the things. And I was like, oh my God, I found like a business sister or a business bestie in this whole process of just hitting her up on social. And you don't always have to leave your house to make friends, right? Another way that you can make more friends in your industry is by actually making content. When you're making content, you're giving people a reason to think about you, and you're top of mind. So when things come up, different events, people will say, hey, are you going to this? And then that'll make you go, because you'll be like, oh, Abu's going to this. Or, you know, you'll have a friend when you go. Or people will recommend opportunities for you outside of events, or you just build a following eventually. So I also recommend making content and keeping up with people online. I have a few rules about building these relationships that when you meet that person, things that you don't do while you're talking to them. My number one rule is that if I'm trying to make a friend, I do not check my phone or Apple Watch or anything while I'm talking to them. And that is so hard for our generation to do, because, you know, your phone, your wrist buzzes when someone's messaging you. You know, we're all addicted to Instagram. And a lot of people end up like looking at their phone. But the moment you do that, you interrupt the connection. And I know that you're not interested in what I have to say. And so make sure you put your phone down. Make sure you are listening. I ask people lots of questions about themselves before they can ask me questions about myself. One, I'm actually curious about what they have to say. But 2, it's how you build a relationship, because then you hear those stories and then you remember them. And then when you meet them again and you bring up those things, I'm like, oh my God, you really cared. So that's huge, right? So listening, asking questions, don't check your phone, and do not use this opportunity to brag on yourself. There are times to brag on yourself, but it is not when you are trying to make a friend in business. Because imagine they could be bragging on themselves, or they've heard this 1,000 times, or this is not impressive to them. When you meet successful people, they don't really want to talk about work. Most people don't know that, but like when you meet somebody who is talking to rich people all the time, billionaires, investors, VCs, etc., all we do is talk about money all day at work. So when I'm making a friend, I want to know, what are you looking forward to? What vacation are you going on? How are your kids? How's your love life? Because a lot of the a lot of the times those things are suffering because they're focused on work. So I think it's a time to ask them about something other than the business, is how you actually build a relationship. The number one question I get is, Kim, will you coach me? Will you mentor me? Will you advise me on raising funding? And it's really hard to do one-on-one things, but I am going to launch a community to help you guys fund your business. And the way you get access to that community is by clicking the link in the show notes, kimlewisceo.com, and join the mailing list. You'll be first to know when I'm dropping a community so we can help you fund your business. All right, now back to the episode. So many of you are like, okay, Kim, you just told me how to make friends and how to network. How is this actually getting me more money in my business? I have a very good example of how making friends got me more money in my business. I went to Martha's Vineyard for the first time last year, and one of my investors had a house that they rented out. It was called the Black Joy House, and they invited different limited partners in their fund. They invited lots of founders. They invited funders from different banks and things like that. And we all got together just to talk about investing in Black and brown founders, et cetera, et cetera. And I was just on the porch rocking in my rocking chair. It was raining. It was like torrential rain coming down. And there's this woman sitting next to me. And she's just asking about my business. And she's like, oh, so what are you doing? Do you like it? How's it going? Oh, I think I've heard of Chromix. I'm not so sure. And I'm like, oh, yeah, it's cool, blah, blah, blah. But how are your kids? How are your family? And she's like, oh, we've been coming to Martha's Vineyard for about 20 years now. My family, they have a house here. I'm like, oh, this is amazing. Like, this is my first time at Martha's Vineyard. I've never even experienced anything like this. So this is really, really cool. For the longest, I thought Martha's Vineyard was this like magical place. Now, it is magical, but it's kind of like old school. It's like the houses, I thought they would be like big mansions or something like that. And they're not really. They're like cottages or like small old homes, but worth so much money. And I learned about the history of Martha's Vineyard. So she was telling me about how like it was the first place Black people could buy houses. And she started telling me about the Inkwell Beach and how it was the only beach that Black people could go to. And so I just learned so much about Martha's Vineyard. And then later on, I found out that she was actually the editor-at-large of Cosmopolitan magazine. Now imagine if she had told me that first and I was just focused on, can you put my product here? How do I get placement? Me. We would have never built a genuine connection. And then fast forward to December. At the end of December, she emails me asking me for my scalp massager because I believe we sent her like a PR package later. Like I focused on the family and the kids and the personal stuff initially and then sent a PR kit later. Didn't expect anything of it. Didn't even follow up about it. She's like, hey, Kim, I loved your scalp massager. I'm going to be on the Today Show in early January. Can you send me 8 of them? I was like, absolutely. Send her 8 scalp massagers. And then on the Today segment, early January, literally Al Roker is massaging his head with our scalp massager for almost like the entire segment. And we end up selling hundreds of our actual scalp massager. And this all just came from me talking to her about her family coming up in Martha's Vineyard. And I think it's just so critical that you focus on actually building real friendships and getting in the room and then making real friends. That is going to take you so much further than being like, I'm trying to target this VC and get this amount of money from them. That almost never pans out the way you want it to. You almost never get the check from the VC that you're dying to get one from. But the preparation for getting that check from that VC is what really serves you because you'll usually end up getting money from somebody else. And I say VC, but I could be talking about angel investors. I could be talking about banks. Like for a lot of these people, you need the same level of preparation and the same level of networking to get things done. Like people won't tell you that, but like friendships are greater than financials. Repeat after me. Friendships are greater than financials. And my last piece of advice is once you get this email to this person, once you get this connection and you are a founder, the best thing you can do is follow up, right? That either means if it was a personal connection, get their Instagram. I exclusively manage a lot of these relationships from Instagram because I post every single day. And so I'll often send them messages. Everybody that you see on this podcast, I DM them to come on this podcast. And they flew out on their own dollar and dime. So that means these people are clearing their schedule for a day. These rich and successful individuals who have raised tens of millions of dollars or make tens of millions of dollars, some of them more than 100 million. They cleared their day to fly to Atlanta, to come and sit on this couch for 30 minutes to talk to me. They pay for their flight in their hotel. I have not paid them anything. And they are sharing their knowledge with you guys. There's no greater testament to the value of networking than that example. And then mind you, I have not asked these people for anything else. So I am not emailing them saying, hey, can you make this intro for me to this person? Sometimes, but that's usually not the case. I'm not saying, hey, can you write me a check for $10,000, $20,000? I knew that I had one big ask that I could ask of them, and I saved it for my podcast. So hopefully you keep that in mind. I've known some of these individuals for years, and I've never asked them for anything except to come on this podcast. So you really want to hold off on an ask if you're building a relationship, because no one wants to feel used. I don't like that feeling either. So once you get this information, right, keep up with them through DM, or if it's an investor or an angel investor you want to give you a check, put them on a newsletter that you have that's private. Maybe it's 10 people, 5 people, 20 people, I don't know. And you are giving them monthly updates on the business, trailing 3 months revenue, a forecast of what you're going to do next month, 3 biggest wins and 3 biggest challenges. Those emails will lead to an investment. I did that for a full 12 to 24 months before I ever asked Arlan for anything. Arlan Hamilton, she wrote my first check for $25,000, and then later introduced me to investors who wrote me $1.2 million in checks, because I basically maintained that relationship through email with her. So I cannot stress enough, make real friendships be genuine. Get yourself in the room. Make sure you're a quick study when you do. And then keep up with them via Instagram and or email. And I can assure you, you will find your way to some capital. Thank you guys so much for listening to this episode of the More Rounds podcast. And I'll see you guys soon. Peace.